I wanted to ask you a little bit about yourself and your own experience. How were you exposed to startup
Yes.
environment?
So I arrived in Australia in 2016, and I'd spent my career in the enterprise corporate environment. But I joined not a startup, but a scale up company that had been going for 3 or 4 years, had about $2.5 million worth of income per year, but was not growing. And that was my entry to the startup scale up community in Australia. And I very quickly learned that there was an extraordinary pool of resource available in the software development domain. The challenge was attracting them to work with the company that I was in versus working with the competition. So I spent a lot of time helping the people that we employed explore their own networks to find people who would be suitable to work in our company. So our whole philosophy was, that we were a team. We had a very strong purpose and a strong culture. And what we were looking for was more people like us, but also people who came from different ethnic backgrounds or perhaps came from abroad to give us, depth in our culture, besides it being very collaborative, but having people who had experience of working in different domains as well as working in Australia. So that's what we really focused on. I spent 2 years there with 3 weeks. We sold that business to Growth Ops in 2018. And that gave me the opportunity to get involved in other startups and scale ups in Australia. So here we are in 2026, 10 years on.
And you sold how many businesses already
This
this
is,
year?
I've sold 3 so far in,
That's a good
in
journey.
10 years. And I'm now embarking on the next phase to find the next 1 or 2 companies that I can assist in scaling as well.
Okay, so what do you think the difference is in 2026 in startup ecosystem and 2016?
It's a very, very different environment today, which has been impacted, by the geopolitical situation, by technology, and obviously the advent of artificial intelligence and how that's now come to the fore. It's a very disruptive technology, and it's having a profound impact on the way that technology is adopted in organizations, and it's having a profound impact on the technology sector itself. So traditionally, SaaS, software as a service, has been the dominant way that enterprises have got software to work in their organizations over the last 20 years. That model is being really questioned now because using AI and agentic AI, it's quite possible to replace a lot of the things that per seat SaaS products do. So there's been huge disruption, for example, in the legal sector, where, mid-January, there was something like a $800 billion drop in the stock value of legal companies in the States because Anthropic came up with this sort of very sophisticated prompt that basically replaced pretty much everything that the main SaaS platforms in that market actually did. So that's an example of how technology is having a massive impact on how organizations are looking at the future.
So let's say if I am a startup in SaaS industry, do you think that I have no chances?
I don't think that's the case. I think there is space for SaaS. It's more a case of thinking about how you're going to price it. So how people actually pay for the product. So the traditional model is usually per seat, whereas artificial intelligence is usually consumption based. And I think that is really causing the SaaS industry to have to look at the way that they price up and sell their product to companies to use, because the argument would be, well, if I'm not actually using the software, why do I need to have a seat? I'm only using it when I need it. So I need it on demand, which is really what AI is providing, is an on-demand service.
And is there any specific industry that you're interested in startups, or you're looking broadly?
I look very broadly. I'm looking for companies that are seeking to either disintermediate, i.e. remove a layer within a supply chain, or organizations who have a breakthrough technology that's going to change the way that a customer consumes that product.
So for a startup from, let's say, Europe, who is background, traditional thought is that you have to go to Silicon Valley to succeed. That was always the case. The second thought is you have to go to United Arab Emirates because of the tax haven. And then Australia is seemingly an emerging market where people are turning towards and considering whether or not, it's a place to go and scale your startup.
Yes.
What are your thoughts, or what can you recommend to that European startup or any overseas startup who is looking into Australian market and considering between US, let's say, and Australia, or US and any other Asia Pacific country?
So I think the advantages that Australia has is a very similar regulatory and compliance system in most sectors to European companies or American companies, but obviously on a smaller scale. So if you have a product in the fintech area, medtech, climate change, ESG, any of those sectors, Australia is a really good place to try stuff out at a relatively low risk, provided you can get the resource to work on those things. So I think one of the challenges that Australia has is a limited size of workforce, particularly qualified, which is why it's a good place for people who've got qualifications in engineering, the sciences, and technology to consider as a place to come and work. Even if it's not permanent, it's a great place to come and work because it has lots of similarities from a cultural and a sort of societal perspective to Europe and to the United States.
And I guess security here is much stronger when it comes to IP protection and it comes to any other governing laws. When you look at what I know in Emirates, whether, taxes is excellent sort of source of saving, but there are no securities around it, around your IP, around your technology. Here, I think Australia offers that.
It does, and I've worked in the Middle East and in India and the United States and Europe, and I have to say that the attractiveness of the Arab world or the Middle East for Westerners is there because it's a relatively tax-free environment. But there are challenges in working in that environment, and it doesn't suit everybody. I think you have to be prepared to make certain sacrifices when you're working in the Middle East that you wouldn't have to make when you're here because of the culture of the environment and the way that business gets done in the Middle East. You've got to be well connected. It's no good just going in there thinking, well, I'm an expert in finance, I'll be successful. You actually do have to spend time building up a network of contacts and people that you're going to be working with in order to be successful in that particular region. Whereas I think if you look at coming to Australia, it will have a feeling of familiarity about it because of the setup of the legal system, the way that government operates, its democracy. It does feel quite sort of comfortable for people coming from Europe and from the United States because it has all of the facets of those countries in the way that they operate.
So talking about connections and networking in Australia.
Yes.
How difficult it is for a startup to find the right people, to raise funds, to just sort of to connect, and what do you recommend in terms of connections? How do you approach?
Yes. Yeah. So I, for the last 3 years, have been working for a Danish company, and they bought my business, which was a distributor for their software product, because they recognized they needed to have a country presence in order to be successful in the region, to have their brand, if you like, visible within the region. They also wanted to establish the capability to provide this kind of follow the sun service model. So Australia was strategically very important for them for serving the Asia Pacific region. They had people in Europe and they had people in the States, but they didn't have people in the Asia Pacific region. So Australia was a great place for them to establish that, which was why they wanted to buy our business. So they bought our business, which instantly gave them a team of qualified people to work in the region and support their operations. So for any technology company particularly coming to Australia, it's important you understand you can't kind of manage them remotely. There needs to be leadership and some degree of control within the country itself, because, you know, you're going to have to hire people, you're going to have to pay them. You need to have a director who's actually listed as a director in the country. So the investment has to be, look, we're going to basically do a bit of a top down. We'll put a general manager in, we'll bring in sales, we'll bring in support, we'll bring in our technical people, or we'll try and hire those people locally.
And that's where we can help. So we can help to set up the company in Australia and help to connect most probably some people with people like you who might be interested in assisting in scaling this startup in Australia.
I think this kind of the tyranny of distance belief is getting eroded now, because we're in a very, very connected world. And I think that because it's so far, or perceived to be so far away from everywhere else and on a different time zone, people think that looks difficult, too hard. We won't bother putting people in there. We'll just service it from our own local resource. I think that's a big mistake. I think you need to have people in the territory actually working for you there.
So what other benefits are for being in Australia?
I mean, it's probably the biggest market in the world if you look at it as a regional market. But I think you've got to understand that it's in the same way that Europe is, 29 or 20, 30 countries. It's the same thing here. You've got multiple countries. They all have different jurisdictions, different regulations, et cetera, et cetera. So you've got to kind of take bites out of it. There's no real value in saying, well, we'll just take on the whole region. Think about where you want to actually dedicate resource to getting some kind of market penetration so that you've got presence. And Australia is just a fantastic place to base that, because I think if you can prove to people that you can operate successfully in Australia, which is, by the way, is the same size as North America from coast to coast, then you've kind of proved that you've got a viable product and it's, working in market. You've got references, you've got the ability to show people that you've been successful there. So it's a great platform to then expand within the rest of the region. And there's a lot of investment coming into this region. I was looking at some data on the startup and scale-up community. And if you go back to 2021, there was something like $10 billion worth of investment going into scale-ups and startups. Then there was a colossal dip in 2022, 23, and it's now started climbing back up again. So last year, $5.1 billion worth of investment went into startups and scale-ups. And the prediction is it's going to continue going upwards.
Right. And there are lots of R&Ds provided by the government, right?
There's a lot of support, a lot of tax deductions, more and more incentives are being offered to companies coming to Australia. And the other thing is that the perception has been all the money is going into AI. Well, that's not actually quite true. What it's going into is products that have got AI embedded in them. So if you've got something in climate change, if you've got something in med tech, fintech, all of the techs, provided there's a kind of component which demonstrates you're using AI in order to deliver your solution, you're going to attract investment.
So you mentioned the fintech and medtech and all the other industries that are very important now to Australian government and easy to get the startup going and get the funding going. What would be an industry where you would say, no, Australia is not for you? Would it be a CRM platform or Shopify platform or something like this? Is there any industry in particular that Australia overpopulated?
I don't think there's a single sector that isn't being addressed in Australia. I think the ones that perhaps have not been as successful as people thought they would be the retail sector, because, we have a relatively small market from a retail perspective. But all of the primary industries, energy, engineering, construction, marine, defense, and all of the techs, all of those are very, very strong investment opportunities and employment opportunities in Australia.
So from your personal experience, how long does it take from the startup to scale to the point of sale on average?
Oh my God. I don't know that there's even a metric on that. But I do think that it really does depend on timing. If you've got a product that is on message at a particular time, it suddenly takes off. And I'll give you two examples. One was Employment Hero, which has been hugely successful globally, Australian business, hugely and very well run. But they were in the right place at the right time, right price point, brilliant execution of their strategy, and have become basically one of the strongest companies in the HRIS, information systems sector. The other one is Go1, and interestingly, Go1 started up initially during the dot-com boom as a company that was building websites and did a big pivot to become a company that provided training content and has gone on to be a double unicorn, a $2 billion business. So those two took, the best part of 10 years to actually get to that point. I think actually Employment Hero is a bit quicker than that. But, the benchmark in the SaaS sector is you become a unicorn, which is a $1 billion valuation. And I think that most of the ones that I can think of have probably taken between 8 and 10 years to get to that point.
I think the reason I'm asking is that there is this notion that Australia is so risk averse that it takes much longer to scale up than it would be in the US.
Well, it depends. If they're a company that's only operating in Australia and has no ambition to actually sell outside this territory, it could take a long time because, it's a limited market. There is a limited population, limited amount of opportunity for growth. But if you're a company that has ambition to use Australia as a platform to then expand into the Asia Pacific region and into the Middle East and into Europe and the United States, then the world is your oyster.
You mentioned something about the fact that there are so many people who were laid off in Australia.
Yeah. So what's happening is organizations are sort of thought of as being a triangle shape.
Yes.
And what a lot of companies are doing is taking out that bottom layer and turning it into a diamond shape. They're adopting AI at the base of the organization, keeping a sort of middle intelligence layer of humans and senior executives. Some very interesting data came out recently about the impact of AI in the tech sector that suggests that whilst there's been a slice of people taken out of that layer, a few of them are coming back in because what's happened is there's been this kind of replacement in coding and replacement in evaluating legal documents, which means that basically software developers have been laid off, paralegals have been laid off, but AI is actually operating at such a pace they're having to rehire people to do testing, to basically verify the work that AI has done.
Because mistakes happen.
Because mistakes happen, there are hallucinations. So there's still a need to have people eyes on what an AI engine is producing.
There was something about benefit of Australia investing in data centers, and we have a lot of land here. Do you know anything about that?
Well, I mean, that's where the majority of the investment in the large tech companies is going, is in building data centers. It's that kind of old adage of build it and they will come. So the risk around that is colossal because if there isn't the take up of AI that everybody is anticipating, the amount of money that's being invested in these data centers will have been wasted. This is the thing that worries the investment community, is the $300 billion worth of investment going into data centers in just 3 companies at the moment. And they're building these data centers because they need the capacity, but they also want to sell that capacity to other people. Nobody really knows if this supposed bubble is going to burst. Australia is in a relatively good position to be able to provide sites for data centers. But the thing that really is the challenge for Australia is the supply of energy, because these data centers consume colossal amounts of energy.
Okay. To end this conversation, is there anything else you want to tell? I don't know, wish you good luck to little startups. Can they contact you if they have an idea that might be interesting.
Look, I think if there are any startups that you're in contact with who are interested in exploring the practicalities, if you like, of establishing themselves in Australia, I would love to have a conversation with them. I do think that there's never been a better time for startup and scale-up companies to consider Australia as a target market.
Thank you, Paul. We will listen to your details.
Thank you.
Post, and good luck.